Welcome to Discover the Difference, a podcast brought to you by CE3. I'm Jamie Reed, and alongside Gabriel, today we have our teammate Ryan Boggs, who brought onto the show Chris Mefford. Along with co-author Kyle Bucket, they wrote a book called Leadership is Overrated, which has quickly become an Amazon #1 bestseller. Prior to becoming an esteemed author, Chris started his career with world-famous Dave Ramsey, starting in the marketing department and rising through the ranks of becoming an executive VP, before venturing out on his own, launching Culture First, and becoming a business leader coach. Chris brings a ton of energy, fun, perspective, and curiosity to everything he does. Enjoy this episode of Discover the Difference with Chris Mefford. Can you give us a little backdrop? Like, it seems like you're a quasi-marketing genius here. Where did that come from? Is that something that was set with intention, or how did you?
I would say it was accidental, but I always felt like I should go into it. Like it was my calling, but the family business was teaching. So my uncle was a superintendent of schools. My mom was a teacher. My aunt was a teacher. My sister was a teacher. My grandmother was a teacher. My grandfather worked in the school systems as well. And so I just became a teacher for 4 years and then ultimately hated it. Teaching is a great experience for everybody, and it was a lot of fun, but it was just kind of the same thing over and over again. And I felt like I could, I want to do more, try new things. I had ideas, and you're kind of squeezed into this. So I went to work for a buddy for the summer who owned an ad agency. I was a young teacher. We don't have any money. It's kind of fun. Oh, you got summers off, but you're making teachers' wages and you don't have any, 2 pennies rubbed together. So I went and worked for him for a summer and did like sales in the agency world. I made more money that summer than I did an entire year of teaching. And so I didn't go back. And it was awesome. And I did that for many, many years. And then realized I'd meet with all these marketing directors and CMOs, and they were like, what do you think we should do? And so I would come up with ideas for them, and they would run them. Some were good. And we'd go with it like that. Ultimately, then it was like, hey, I should go back to school. I think their job was fun because then I could just hire an agency to do all the work for me. That's what at least it felt like from the other side. So
was it fun because at first because of the money, or was it the money was just a byproduct of the success?
No, I think it was definitely fun because of the money. But it was like I was enjoying it. Like I felt really invigorated by the whole experience. Like, how do you get people to try things and do things? We were at this conference once, and I came up with this idea that we should give away free t-shirts. And it seems silly, everyone does free t-shirts, but at the time nobody was really doing it at the conference. And you could come and they would bring like a dozen or give them away. And then there's about 5,000 people there, and so we did about 5,000 t-shirts, and we got a really good designer to do them. So they were really, really cool looking t-shirts, and we put them on great quality, which oftentimes when you do t-shirts at a mass scale, they don't want to do that. So I convinced them to do that.
Beyond the Fruit of the Looms.
Right, definitely beyond that. And then we said to them, we wrapped up the t-shirts, so people just started flooding the booths for their free t-shirt, and it said, hey, wear this tomorrow. We're giving away 50 MacBooks and 50 iPads and 50 Apple Watches. If you wear your t-shirt, be on the lookout. So the next day at the conference, there were like 3,000 people wearing our t-shirts everywhere. And we gave away all that stuff. We couldn't have bought that level because they wanted us to become like a corporate sponsor of 150,000. I think we ended up spending like 50,000, but we had the whole day of everything. We had more traction, excitement. People were disappointed they didn't get their t-shirts, wanted over getting more. And so that level of excitement and fun and seeing how it works. And then I feel like I love kind of figuring out what makes you tick, what gets you off the couch, what motivates you, what gets you excited. I think marketers, as you guys probably know, we sort of get a bad rap, like, oh, we're all shilling something, or we're lying about something, or we're misrepresenting. And I think there are those out there, but the truth is we're usually trying to get you to do something positive or encouraging, and not everybody's trying to get you to hit your wardrobe and go to Target every weekend or wherever you go. And
that's hard for us to imagine as insurance guys. Everybody thinks the same thing. I think about the last Padres game I went to is like a game where we were getting killed and everybody was just kind of like either drinking their sorrows away or not that engaged in the game. And then they came out with the t-shirt cannon, and it was like the entire stadium erupted with energy. I'm like, And these are probably like $3 cheap T-shirts, just electrified a crowd. You know, it's like.
I was living in Canada at the time. My wife was Canadian, and I bumped into this. We went to this conference, ended up meeting this guy, Dave Ramsey. I don't know if you're familiar with him.
And we were talking about it earlier.
So I ended up working for him for 10 years, becoming his vice president. And so I was one of his first marketers in the company.
Wait, how did you meet him? Yeah, like you just like.
I was with the church, and when they wanted to do this expansion, and they had heard there's a guy in Nashville who can teach you how to do expansions without going into big debt. And so we went down to this conference in Nashville. My wife's sister actually had done the opposite of what she had done. I was American and went up to Canada, and she married an American and went down to Nashville. So we liked Nashville. And so I was at this conference, went down to see him. And so I was there for 3 days and ended up I didn't know anything about him, and just talking to him and seeing what this whole thing was about. They're another great organization. They won Best Place to Work for 10 straight years in Nashville. And it seemed cool. Like the energy there was great. It was the first time I'd ever experienced anything, like what you experience now or where I'm at now. It's such an amazing feeling to say everybody's happy here. Everybody's engaged. Everybody feels recognized. It's incredible. And so we just bumped into it, and he's like, what do you do? And I told him, he's like, we're looking for a marketer. We haven't had one, and we really want to get one and kind of see where it takes us and really ramp up things. And so that's...
At what stage was Dave Ramsey at this time?
So at that point, we were on about 125 radio stations, and we had about 115 team members. And so today, as we sit here, he has about 725 radio stations. He is a member of both the Talk Radio and Radio Hall of Fames. And we have about 1,500, or they now have about 1,500 employees.
I was telling these guys, I'm going to tell a story. My wife has an economics degree. I have a safety degree. It's the dumbest degree on earth. Or I shouldn't say that, but anyways,
all those safety people, scratch that.
We get married, and we're kind of butting heads over finances. I buy Dave Ramsey's Monopoly game, and I'm sitting on a Friday night forcing my wine to drink wine and play Dave Ramsey's Monopoly to, try to get aligned on like what we're going to do with our money. And, we didn't have 2 nickels back then. So you're going to really be conscious with it. And I loved all of Dave Ramsey's stuff. I read all his books and...
Yeah, he's the real deal. What you see is what you get on the radio. It's raw. I think he's intense for people to work with, because he's so direct and clear. And some people don't like that level of directness and clear. So I tended to thrive in it. I think he appreciated that. And I think a lot of people were intimidated by him and his success. And so I think he liked it. Not that I wasn't intimidated from time to time, but that, I just was, hey, this is cool. What else can we do?
Do you have a story about Dave and maybe intimidating you or something, a time where he was really direct with you and you're like, whoa?
I have many stories like that. I would say there's a couple things. When I used to tell my team and they would be new and we go down and meet for the first time, I'd be like, hey, you guys have been playing in the minor leagues. We're going to the pros. And when I say we're going to the pros, we're going to the All-Star game today. Because when you would present with Dave, like he had limited time. He's on the air for 3 hours. He had a big company he was trying to grow. And the reality was he didn't suffer fools. And so if you had a weak spot in your presentation, he was going to find it, and it was going to be the very first question he asked. And so I used to practice being Dave, but we would practice meetings before we'd go meet with Dave. And I think that led to a lot of success and stuff. But as far as stories go, I think we had this situation. We were going to do the simulcast, and the simulcast wasn't going well. Not because of anything we did, but the simulcast company we brought on board was glitchy and it was frustrating. And Dave was frustrated, and he'd called us into his office and he'd gotten upset in a very loud way and a very respectful way. He was never disrespectful, but he made it known that he wasn't very happy. And we left. And the next day, the guy who was head of the simulcast quit. And I had gone back to my office and said, hey, you set us up for success and we didn't sort of run it into the end zone. Sorry about that. We'll work harder. And I remember him coming into my office, which he never did. You always went down to his office. He came into my office and was like, he was super intense. And he's like, that's the way you handle situations like that. And he was like, it was like I was in trouble all over again, but I think he was trying to compliment me. And it was wild. And then the other one that really stands out is I was brand new there, and there was the EVP at the time and the VP, and they wanted us to go down and show this video thing that we were going to air either as a promotional item or whatever. And I thought it was kind of like amateurish. And I remember the EVP saying, hey, what's the worst that can happen? You can say no, right? So we get down there, we show it to him, and the three of us are sitting there. I've been there all of like maybe a month. And he sits back from his desk after watching it, and he puts his hand on his head and he rubs it, and then he looks at the EVP and he looks at the VP, and then he looks at me and he says, it concerns me, in the most calm way, it concerns me that the three of you think this is good enough quality for us to show and send out of this organization. And the funny thing, the first thing that popped in my head was, I guess no is not the worst thing you can say, because that's pretty bad. That's right up there. Are you sweating? Yes. I was like, I had nothing to do with it. It was these guys. But yeah. But that was the funny one. I used to tell him that. I guess it's not the worst he can say.
It's a fun way to be new on the job.
Right. So, but I always loved him. You know, he got upset and frustrated, but his frustration, which kind of leads me to why we was talking about this, his frustration was always, you're not thinking about the end user. You're not thinking about our listener. You're not thinking about the people attending our events. You're just thinking about yourself and taking the shortcuts. And that's the stuff that would really, really get him fired up. So when we brought on, I eventually got made VP of all our events, and I had said, hey, I think it'd be cool. We have a bunch of people that come into these arenas and they sit, and then the show starts. I think it'd be fun if we did like a pre-show of some sort. That'd be really exciting. And so we got these sponsors lined up, and they would always want to come up and talk about themselves. And I'd be like, hey, you can't come up on the stage ever unless you're giving away something or doing something. And so we would invent these games to play, and then the sponsors would have to come up and give away more money on top of what they were doing, or give away books, or give away kits or games or whatever. But whenever we did that, they got super duper excited. The crowd did, because it was like, yeah, it was more fun, and people remember it's 5 hours of personal finance, for crying out loud, on a Saturday. Like, you gotta have a little fun.
Yeah.
So is that the takeaway from Ramsey, is like really be thinking about what the end user is
He taught me a lot of things. You know, by the end, my last 4 or 5 years there, I was flying around on the jet that we had as a company, doing events, and sitting next to him. It was just a 4-seater. It wasn't a massive, like, you know, Trump-esque jet. It was, and so sitting next to him and watching him, being a VP with him for many years. I think he wrote a book called EntreLeadership that went to #1 on the New York Times. And you know, he worked at a place that had been voted best place to work for 10 years. The Christmas parties were legendary for fun, and the way he would just bless everybody and pour into everybody. And so I think the lessons that I learned and grew was just watching and paying attention. And that was certainly one of them. You know, hey, when someone asks you a question at the events, don't tell them, hey, workbooks are over there, or the restrooms are over there. You walk them to the workbook. You walk them to the restrooms. Everybody on the team does the same stuff. So it was just a higher level of quality assurance. Or if someone comes up to you and says, I don't have enough money to get this kit and this book, what should I do? Tell them to get the kit and give them the book, or give them the book and tell them you'll give them the kit. Like, it was that level of quality that, you know, I think so many times people are like so concerned that people are going to, you know, probably even the Padres, so many people are going to sneak in. But the reality is not that many people ever do. And if they do, okay, so what? What's the big deal? Then they got their lives squared away, or whatever it was that they're after. But
it's funny because I remember shopping at Nordstrom's the first time, where all they do is just walk around the counter and hand you the bag. Yep. A gesture that small creates an emotion in you that differentiates them exponentially. And it's like the littlest of things that can really just make somebody feel like the experience is so much different.
Well, you know, I don't know if we're live or recording, but like one of the stories that I like to share is and the reason we wrote the book was it's so easy for people to make a great organization that's fun and full of culture. They just make it so hard on themselves. I just wish people would come in and do their job, or listen, or work hard. But what incentive is that? You're paying them, which the other guy across the town can do as well. And you can say, well, fine, go get another job somewhere else. To which I would say, great, you'll just keep returning, turning over people left and right constantly. I did a talk about a year ago to this company. And one of the things I discovered was that Boston Consulting did a survey of 200,000 workers worldwide. And they said, what is the number one thing you wish you got more of at work? And number 8 was money. Number one, and number two was recognition and appreciation. So many leaders have such a hard time telling people they appreciate them, telling people that they did a good job. Well, why should I tell them? I pay them. Isn't that good enough? And it's that whole mentality that, yeah, you do all that, and that is great. But if you want to create a great organization of people who are willing to sort of step in front of a bus for you, tell me you appreciate them.
What's 3 through 7?
I can't remember.
Testing you.
Well, it's also, I think there's a generational aspect too to that, right? Is on the recognition.
Yeah.
So definitely as the generations, continue, the more and more recognition is important, I think.
Yeah. The premise of the book in a nutshell is we spend $60 billion a year in this country on leadership development. That's TED Talks, that's workshops, that's books themselves, whatever it might be, conferences, bringing in speakers to your organization, whatever it might be. You spend $60 billion a year, yet survey after survey, year after year, whether it's Forbes, whether it's Gallup, whether it's Harvard, people surveyed, 75 to 85% of those surveyed still hate their boss. And so,
what did you say? 75
to 80% of those surveyed year after year hate their boss.
Wow, that's a staggering number. 75.
Here's how we know that is accurate, because a lot of bosses out there will go, well, that's not me. That's not true. But when we flip the script and we ask the boss, how many people do you think hate you or don't like you that work for you? They say between 30 and 35%. So it's the exact opposite of the numbers. And so when we ask leadership or we ask the employee, the numbers add up either way you do it. And so the reality is we're spending a lot of money and not getting much back in return for all that leadership development. So the whole premise of leadership is overrated is that we're putting too much emphasis on creating leaders, but we're not training them. We think you should be putting more emphasis on the teams. Great organizations have great teams. Now, obviously, you need good leaders to pull that in, and it's a bit provocative in the title. But the reality is, name me one SEAL. You can name me every SEAL team, probably SEAL Team 6 from the starters, SEAL Team 4, SEAL Team 3. But you can't necessarily name an individual SEAL. Maybe, Jocko's out there. He's local here in San Diego, so we might know him. But generally speaking, nobody could tell you. And so we put so much emphasis on the leader, and we tell the leader what a great team. But, that team at Amazon, if you will, that has, works hard, shows up every day, delivers everything, and does an amazing job, we would never kind of recognize them at the level that we elevate a leader over there, for instance. And so it's kind of a paradox of leadership, I call it. The ironic thing is we hold on to that. We still desperately want to be recognized ourselves as leaders, that we want to make sure everybody knows what a good job we did. But when I give away all the credit to everybody on my team, Tim, you did fantastic. Susanna was amazing. I had nothing to do with this. Jared put it all together. Thank them, not me. The irony is that everyone thinks I did an amazing job. Everyone knows I did an amazing job. They're like, oh, he's so humble. Look at him. He's so great. And I don't do it for that. But the reality is what these leaders so desperately want and they hold on to so much to let everybody know that they've done an amazing job, they could get if they would just give away all the credit.
So what's the psychology on that? Because it sounds like we've got 80% blind spots with leadership.
Yeah. There's a couple of things I'll share within that. It's a good question. And the first is, so if you think about it, I think we call anybody a leader now. Anybody who's in charge of anybody is a leader. Whether they want to be or whether they're qualified to be or not. And so we typically put people in charge who have no sort of ability and leadership. They've never been trained. It's new to them. They've got struggles. I've been in organizations where we're like, hey, he's just not cutting it. And I'm like, have you done anything to help him or train him? Or did you he was the best sales guy, and so you put him in charge? And that's exactly what they had done.
Oh, we shouldn't have done that?
And so, but if you think about it, and we go back to those numbers where 75 or 85% of the people come in, hate their boss, which really translates to they don't feel recognized, they don't feel heard, they don't feel appreciated, whatever it might be that equals that. Essentially what we're saying is they're coming into the office and only putting about 30 to 35% of 100% of their effort in to their jobs each and every day. So let me say that again, because those are a lot of percentages, but only about 30% of your company is coming in and putting 100% of their effort in. If you could change that simply by making them feel more appreciated, recognizing the hard work they do, recognizing them in front of their peers, and you could raise that up to 50%. Imagine what that would do to your bottom line. Imagine what it would do to a country or a nation's bottom line. If you kind of were able to say, hey, I want to create an environment where you feel valued and appreciated. And look, I know you don't have any more time off, and I'm so sorry for that, but you've got to get to the airport early because the flight's changed. Go ahead. But I've been in so many organizations where little things like that are like, you can't take it off. You don't have any more time. You'll have to rearrange your entire schedule. And I think to myself, what good is that? Like, do you think that employee's going to come in and work hard for you? Do you think that they're going to stay here the rest of the day and those next 8 hours are going to be the most productive hours of their entire, like, what have you got to lose by just saying, okay, I understand. They're going to come back. They're going to be more dedicated, more loving, more caring, and probably more refreshed. But leaders don't do that. And so if we could elevate that game and say, hey, what do I need to do as a leader so my team doesn't hate me, or at least wants to come in and give at least at a minimum 50 to 75% of their energy to their task every day, what would that do?
Well, kind of building on Gabe's question and using the reference with the SEALs, with the SEALs that were around, we've heard him say things like, any one of us could command this group, but that guy is in charge and we're under his command for this. And it's interesting because they've done a great job of getting, a lot of alpha dogs all to fall into a particular line, who any one of them may have the capability of leading the group and may have to, depending on what happens in particular situations. So as leaders, in your experience, is it imposter syndrome? Is it an insecurity that they're not giving that kind of empowerment or education to the rest of the team, to where if they're not there, the organization can not only run, but thrive, at the highest level?
Yeah, Kyle Bucket, my co-author here, and retired Navy SEAL, he often shared with me, hey, Chris, we don't always put the highest ranking person in charge of the SEAL mission. And we put the person who has the most skill or most experience with what we're going to do in charge of the mission. And it takes a humble leader then to get out of their way and let them do the job. And I would say, sort of in the corporate world, what we do is we might spend 3 months, maybe even 6 months or longer, depending on the position, bringing someone in and making sure all the references are right, that their skills are right, that they've talked to 100 people in the company or whatever it is, the HR is on board, everybody's on board with them. Bring them in, and then we basically say, hey, we show them where the bathroom is. You can't get a credit card if you're to run your stuff. Make sure you run everything by me first. So we spend all this time making sure they're qualified, and then we bring them in and treat them like a child. And not trusting them. And then essentially the point being, where you can really succeed, and we were just talking about Dave Ramsey, and I feel like this was where he really shined, was bring them in and then get out of their way. Like, you hired them to be awesome, now get out of their way and let them be awesome. And the reality is, I think in the SEALs would do that too. Hey, you guys we all went through the same kind of training. We know we're all awesome. So let's stop all this bravado that comes into play, because we're all equal, and let's get out of the way and let Johnny run the mission because he's the best at this.
It's more defining the objective,
right?
And then allowing the creativity or tools within the team to say, here's how we're going to do it.
Yeah. And my buddy Kyle would tell you, and it also doesn't hurt to, when your life is on the line, to go ahead and let the guy with more experience run the show.
That makes sense.
Yeah, so I was going to ask, so what came first, meeting Kyle Bucket or your relationship with the Honor Foundation?
So no, it was Kyle. I had just moved to San Diego. I didn't know that many people, and I went to a business leaders breakfast that the Rock Church was having, and there was one chair left, and I went over and sat down next to him, and I didn't know it at the time who he was, and we just struck up a conversation. He liked marketing. He said he was in the Navy. He never told me he was in Special Forces. And I said, cool, it was nice meeting you. We kind of went our own separate way. And then he found me on LinkedIn and said he wanted to go get coffee. I want to show you a presentation I'm working on. So we met for coffee in North Park. And then we just had more time together. And that's when I found out he was like, oh, he's still active duty, still Navy SEAL. That's pretty cool. We just became fast friends after that. And we would meet once a week just to hang out and talk at Kensington Cafe or somewhere like that. And I had told him, hey, I always wanted to write a book about culture and leadership. And, it's always fascinating to me because I would pepper him with questions and they weren't typical Navy SEAL questions like, hey, what's it like to, jump out of an airplane in the middle of the ocean and put a device on an oil tower, whatever it is. My questions are like, hey, how do the SEALs continue to kind of keep the spirits high, but also without compromising, your integrity when it comes to the quality of person you get in? Or how do you make sure you always get the best people? How do you keep them motivated or excited? So those are the questions that I was most fascinated with. And he would give me these amazing answers. You're not really a Navy SEAL. Everyone likes to point to Hell Week. Hell Week's the most difficult thing we'll ever go through in our entire lives. And Kyle and I have been on lots of podcasts together with other Navy SEALs that will tell you Hell Week's the worst experience they ever went through. But what is fascinating to me is even though you went through that and you kind of make it through Hell Week, you don't get to call yourself a Navy SEAL for 2 more years. Like it takes a lot of time and energy. And I feel like when it comes to culture and organizations, we want to send you away to a conference for a week, or we want to send you away for the weekend, and we're going back and we it's going to be awesome around here now. And it takes time. And I feel like that's kind of what I've learned in my experience with Kyle and meeting him first. And then he introduced me to the Honor Foundation and the great stuff. So I go over now, help them all with like you guys do with the resumes and their interviewing and walking around, and have probably like you guys loads and loads of coffees because they like to do that. And they're always interesting and fascinating because these guys are just fresh out. They're not even, some of them are even out. And so any kind of help there is just, these guys put their lives on the line every day. For me, I can have coffee with them for sure.
So how was the book born? And you guys got together, you became friends and met a bunch of times.
So I said, let's do a book. I worked with Ramsey. We launched a bunch of books. I'd never actually written a book or even understood the whole process of getting it out there, other than, we would do our own events, and we had 11 million radio listeners. So that helped. We tried to sell the book. So this was new. I was like, hey, I got friends. Let's put it together. So I called up one of my friends who was a writer, and I said, hey, why don't you interview Kyle and I? I'm going to put together like a book template or outline. I'm going to write a whole chapter, and then I'm going to do like a book proposal. And then if you could kind of edit it, just make sure it makes sense, that would be great. So we put it all together, and then I sent it to maybe a dozen or 24 of my friends and associates that I had met over the years, saying, hey, I've got a book. It's with Navy SEAL. I think it's gonna be awesome. You guys should give us a book deal, right? I don't know how it goes, right? That part's all new to me. And I didn't hear back from a single human being. Not one person, even like friends and people, never got back. And I think probably one of my strengths over the years is the soft skills. Like I can pick up stuff that people are putting down without saying much. And so what I was feeling like people were saying by not saying anything was, this is terrible. This book proposal is awful. And so we went back to the drawing board. And so I said, I think my book experience has been, it took 4 years from when we came with the idea to when it actually published. And so that's a long time to stay motivated. That's a long time to keep working at something. You might say, well, you went to college, but this is, it's your stuff. You're creating something new. At college, for instance, you're reading somebody else's stuff, you're commenting on it. But when nothing exists in the universe, so to speak, and you've got to create it outright at a level then that you want to then convince others that they should then listen to or read, it's hard. And so I think it took a lot more time. And so we slowed down. I met a friend in Nashville who had a bunch of books, and I went to him and said, I need help. Tell me what we're doing wrong here and what's up. And so he gave us a whole layout of what we needed to change, but most importantly, why we needed to change it and how publishers would read it. And
what were examples of what you did wrong?
So in the proposal, we didn't necessarily put, hey, who are our influences? They want to know who your influences are. Is this just a flash in the pan type thing? Who are you guys? Are you guys friends? Like we had eventually, when we did start getting interviews from Simon & Schuster and from Penguin and Portfolio, they asked us questions that had nothing to do with our book proposal. And we found out later is because they already liked it. They wouldn't have given us the meeting. They wanted to know, who are you going to sell it to? What is your audience? How big is your audience? Are you guys friends? How well do you get along? We can't get in the middle of this and invest this and you guys have a fight and break up. Yeah, that was it. And it was, what are some influences? What are your next 2 books going to be? They wanted to see all of that. And I'll tell you what, our first meeting was Penguin and Portfolio, which is the largest business distributor in the world. And it was a train wreck. We had no idea because we were ready to go talk about the book and they had 0 questions about the book. Do you guys have a website? What do you guys do? What do you do right now?
Do our business.
Yeah.
We ask every question except insurance.
Yeah, we do. We never talk about it.
Yeah. Which we kind of have a similar, we have the anti-insurance brand. Mm-hmm. Where'd you come up with the anti-leadership brand? Is that something you start out with, or did that evolve?
So that evolved. I would say, once Kyle and I said, hey, we're not going to quit. If you want to do a project where you don't quit, do it with a Navy SEAL, right? Because they got no quit. So I said to Kyle, let's keep going, let's plug away. And so then I reached out based on all the feedback we got from John. We redid everything, even the chapter that we did, and we ran it through so many people. And then all of a sudden we started getting, hey, we'd love to talk to you. We'd love to talk to you. We'd love to talk to you. To the point where we actually then had to choose between publishers, which one we wanted to go with.
Penguin wasn't on the list anymore.
Penguin wasn't on the list. Actually, Penguin didn't come off the list completely. They were like, we think you're a year away. Go work on your, basically, I would love to say go work on your pitch or go work on your product. But really what they were saying was go work on how many people that you have on your Instagram followers or your email list, and then come back to us.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. And I learned that through Ramsey. The publishers don't do anything for you these days. I'll even say when we launched this book, they did 0. They got us on maybe 2 podcasts. That was it. There was no advertising. There's no book tours. And Dave Ramsey is a guy who sold 20 million books. And, we walked away from publishers because we were basically doing all the work to begin with. And so the publishers only want to bank on J.K. Rowling's, or if they have a 4-star general who's made national news or something, that's where they're going to put any of their energy and effort. And so we're grateful that they stepped up and published our book and gave us this opportunity. But as far as the marketing and advertising goes, it did 0. There was 0 help in that regard. So it was harder.
So will you use a publisher in your next book?
So what the publisher does is they'll pay for everything up front. So, unlike a lot of people that we know who've gotten book deals and stuff, what we got was a national book deal. And so our book was in every Barnes and Noble in America. That's where it's, whether you were in Virginia or Dallas or Seattle, it was fun. And so they'll pay for all of the printing and the hardcover. And so that's essentially what you're getting. And then you get a book deal and you earn through that. And so you have to sell through your books before you get anything else outside of that book deal. And, it's not always amazing. And I also would recommend, if you're trying to get rich writing a book, don't do it with another partner, because he's going to get half of it no matter what.
So he's out on the next one.
Right. Or I am. I don't know. We'll see which one gets there first.
That's pretty cool. Where did you two meeting? I feel like we have a gap from when you were in Nashville to coming to San Diego and meeting Kyle. How'd that shake out?
So I came out here, I had left Ramsey. So I've been at Ramsey for 10 years. And so when I started, I was one of the first marketers, and we had 100 people, and then we just kept growing and growing and growing. And, 4 or 5 years in, I was made VP of the events division, and then took over selling the publishing at the events and sponsorships at the events, and then eventually just kind of moving up. And so I had done that for 10 years. Basically, from the minute I arrived to the minute I left, I was on the road and we were pushing and growing. So when I took over the team, we did about 12 events a year and had about 10 people on the team. When I left, we had 50, and we were doing about 100 events because we had hired these additional personalities Dave wanted to push out and drive out and grow sort of the brand. So he wasn't the only one doing all the lifting, and I was just tired. And I said, hey, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. I want to take a break. And so I left, and then helped a few authors with some of their stuff. Henry Cloud, who wrote the book Boundaries, Meg Meeker, who wrote the book 10 Habits of Happy Mothers and Strong Fathers, Strong Daughters, and stuff like that. And then a friend approached me and said, hey, there's a gig in California that you might be interested in. And I said, I don't want to go to California. I hate LA. It's terrible. It's ugly. And it's, no offense to people in LA, but it wasn't my thing. And they're like, it's in San Diego. You should check it out. It's a lot different down there. So we came out here, and sure enough, the guy who interviewed me was in flip-flops and a Hawaiian shirt, and he'd just come in from the beach and surfing. And I was like, this is different. This is new, right? I remember my first week there, he's like, hey, man, we got to get you out of those shoes. You're stressing everybody out by not wearing those flip-flops.
I had the same experience. I wore a suit the first day to the office out here, and they're like, this isn't going to work, buddy. You're going to have to evolve.
I love it.
Truck is so awkward when we're going around in suits, and half the places we're going to, they're just looking at you like, why are these guys all in suits?
Yeah, I can address that.
And all the blue suits. That's even better, yeah. So we came out here, and I love it. It's I had no idea. I hadn't been to San Diego much. I didn't know anything about it before I came out here, and now I'm like, I don't understand why people. You know what? It's terrible in California. Everybody should stay away.
Right.
Stay away. It's awful.
We say the same. I'm from Missouri, and the first time I landed here, I'm like, what is this mystical place? I'm like, how does nobody in the Midwest know about it?
Yep. I was in Ohio. My family's like, are you coming up for Christmas? I'm like, I think you misunderstand how this works when you live in San Diego. Right. You should come here in December.
There's a reason I retired here, and I'm very glad the Navy brought me here, but I have no desire to go back.
It's funny. I knew nothing about it. So when we were coming out here and I was looking at it, I was Googling, like, what's it like to live in San Diego? It's cost of living. And I found somebody who had written, I don't know, whether it was a review or Reddit post or something that said, here's my take on San Diego. I was stationed there 3 years in the Navy, and I've spent the last 25 years of my life trying to figure out how to get back.
That's a good summary.
Yeah. I was like, yep, that's it.
What I meant to ask you earlier, what was the title you started with? Because didn't you say you changed it?
Yeah. So okay, we had an original title that was more like leadership culture. It was like a boring, bland title. And then we started working with a friend who was like, hey, you need to ultimately, the best books are the ones that challenge the status quo. And by challenging the status quo, they ask a question that seems ridiculous or backwards, and then the more you dig in, the more you realize it's not actually that ridiculous or silly, which is how we ended up with Leadership is Overrated. However, that was not the first title or the real title we wanted. We wanted to call it what is actually the first chapter in the book, which is Kill the Leader. So we wanted this idea of, in the Navy SEALs, if they go on mission, they're practicing for the mission, they'll say, boom, you're dead, to the leader of the mission, 3 minutes in, 3 seconds in, 3 days in, so that the mission can go on if the leader dies. And so they train the team to continue on. And so many organizations with leaders, if the leader were to step away or go on a long vacation or have a health issue, the whole organization will kind of come apart, because they haven't really either knighted someone to say, hey, we're all in this together as an organization, or a couple of individuals to step up. And so what happens is they tend to fall apart, or there's no consensus, and it's frustrating. But the SEALs practice that. They practice what happens. And so we liked that idea of kill the leader. Except when we were having the meeting with HarperCollins to solidify the name of the book, we were meeting with them on January 11th. Of 2021, was it, or whatever, right around just after January 6th had happened. And they're like, we're not calling the book Kill the Leader. Absolutely not. Not after people stormed the Capitol and there's so we were disappointed. We're like, maybe the second book, we'll bring it out. It'll be a little less.
So is the concept, it's kind of, I don't know if you've read Good to Great. Mm-hmm. It kind of talks about the great companies. Yeah. When the leader leaves that brought the company to greatness, they continue to be great, versus the ones that when the leader leaves, it goes the other way. Is that kind of the idea, is that, leadership is really spread out to where people feel empowered, and they you don't need a one person to, bring people forward? Right.
I think what happens is, that's a good question. And let me go a little deeper then, because the second part of our book is called Creating Self-Led Teams That Win. So how do you create a group of people that if the leader does die, they continue on with the mission and be successful? And where I found success in my career on my teams is when I empower them and get out of their way and show them. And so I think what happens is, it's not so much that the leader is insignificant. It's that my job is to be teaching my team how to do things and how I do things nonstop. So that if I do leave, or I leave the office, or something happens, they're capable of continuing on, first off. Second, it shows them that I trust them. And when I trust them, they work harder. And when they feel like there's more payoff for them on the long run, they get recognition, they feel valued, they want to work harder, they're all in. They're not like working at, a certain percentage of their abilities. And so I think, it's not creating self-dictating teams that win. So if I say to you, hey, you're in charge of this, we're going to count on you to pull this through, that doesn't mean you get to become the dictator. That just means you're leading the rest of us through this. We're still going to have a say. We still may not like the direction you maybe take it, but you have the authority now to make decisions. You have the authority now to call meetings. You have the authority now to set people up and delegate things. And I think that's generally what I'm talking about when it comes to the fact that we should kill the leader, or leadership is overrated, is that we're calling everybody a leader and treating them like they're the greatest thing ever. And I think it's like an entire class structure that's gone bad. Because if you were a leader, you would have empowered your team by doing these things, allowing them to make decisions, allowing them to call meetings, allowing them to delegate their work to whoever they need so that they can be successful. But what happens is we try and micromanage every little one of it, to the point where now the team doesn't feel very motivated to do any of it. And us leaders go, my gosh, my team doesn't do anything. I'm exhausted all the time. And leadership looks down at us and says, their team is exhausted. They don't do anything. Why can't I get them to do anything? Why can't I have somebody that just does that? And it's this cycle that happens. And it's not healthy. And it's not anything anybody wants. But because of those insecure people, like you had mentioned earlier, that don't want to give up that power, and they want everybody to know how great they are, it demoralizes the team. It frustrates the team. Then the team doesn't work hard, and then they end up hating their boss. And it's just this cycle of things that happen, and it's frustrating.
What happens if they're done all that, and then the teams aren't meeting the objectives, and the opposite occurs? How do you course correct or recover from that?
So there are two ways I've done it. One is easy. Sometimes you got to let people go. Like, I want everybody to work as hard as they can. There's this old saying, hire fast, fire fast. I've never been on that. Like, when I joined an organization once, I said, hey, I had hired this assistant, and I was like, hey, Chris is not really working out for me. I ask her this, she does this. It's frustrating. And I'll never forget, my boss looked back to me and said, maybe Chris is not the problem. Maybe you are. Krista communicates like this and you don't give her any of the details. Krista communicates like this and you don't help her win. You don't bring her into the meetings early. You two have different communication styles. And so she's not winning because you're not communicating with her in a way that she understands. You're communicating with her in a way that you understand. And that's not leadership. Leadership is you going to the team and making sacrifices, not the team coming to you and making sacrifices. So I had initially, that's not to say we don't need to let people go from time to time. We make mistakes. But that's the easiest way to kind of course correct in some ways. But that's not really the best way. The best way is I've found where now I've got to jump in. I've got to roll up my sleeves. I got to help out. You know, I was over there today working on something. This is all these podcasts are sometimes hard because you're like, sometimes you have to say nice things about yourself and it sounds like bragging. But I was working on a sales presentation with some of my team that we've been tasked with putting together. And we were working on it. And I said, no, don't say it like this. Say it like this. Reorganize these slides like that. And I can hear them go, oh, see, he's so good at this. And the reality is you forget, oh yeah, I used to be really good at this before they put me in charge. And I wasn't in charge. I didn't do this stuff every day. But sometimes you got to roll up your sleeves and just get in and help. And I think some leaders look at that as, oh my gosh, I got to do everything, or my team isn't very good. And I just look at it as, hey, here's another great experience, opportunity for us to learn and share and grow together. You know, I wouldn't yell at them. Probably one of the good lessons that I learned early on is I was tasked with bringing this briefcase to an event we were doing in Kansas City, and we were having breakfast in the Nashville airport, and we landed in Kansas City, and I looked over at my boss and I said, did you forget the briefcase? Because I didn't have it. And I knew exactly where I thought it was, which is in the booth at the restaurant in the Nashville airport. And this thing was basically a radio frequency thing. So when we were in the large arenas, there wouldn't be interference with our mics or any of the presentation slides and stuff that happened. It was just a super duper fancy thing that we needed, or else the presentation wouldn't go off. And I remember him looking at me, and he like cocked his head, like he didn't have to say anything because he knew I knew. And I said, I don't have it. It's at the airport in Nashville, I'm pretty sure. And he said, let's get on the phone. Let's see who's coming that hasn't left yet that we can get on. And I remember thinking afterwards, my boss and a lot of bosses would have just lost their mind. First off, he would have looked terrible because I worked for him. He could have yelled at me and screamed at me and told me what an idiot I was, and I had to solve this problem. He could have sent me home. He could have fired me. His first response was, let's get on the phone and see. Like, it was calm. And I remember that lesson early on in my life going, wow, that's what a real leader is. They're not here to yell. That's what I think a leader would do. But real leaders are trying to help their team solve problems, either that they've got into themselves or the leaders gotten themselves into with the team. And so that was just a very valuable lesson early on for me. Like, hey, if you pour into your team will take care of the rest. Like, I don't have to micromanage because they're going to do a good job because I'm going to take care of them no matter what.
Yeah.
And that's kind of some of the lessons early on.
How do you balance, because you mentioned the micromanaging piece, but then you talked about today when you told them where to put the slides, which sounds a little bit like micromanaging. So how do you like balance that, offering your expertise and your experience and your knowledge, because you have a lot of it, with actually letting them still do the stuff the way that they're putting it together?
So one thing I think, when I hear the term micromanage, I feel like that's not you are, but because you're sharing, but like, I just feel like that's an immature individual who says, you can't hold me accountable and I'm not teachable. That's their response to you holding them accountable and trying to help them learn, is to say, you're just micromanaging me. Because the reality is I'm not. I'm just we're all trying to win. I have a boss I'm trying to answer to, and you're trying to answer to me, and we're all trying to do this together. So micromanagement is, I feel like, just an immature kind of response to say things. That's not to say there aren't those bosses out there who manage everything. And I think that goes back to, the original, which was, hey, we got to build trust, hire them and get out of the way. Like, why did you hire someone that you have to micromanage? Why did you hire someone, when I hear about these companies who don't necessarily, like, you can't have social media on the computer at work, or they don't have YouTube or whatever, Instagram. I think, why did you hire people that were going to be on Instagram all day? Like, stop acting like you had no say in this. You're the boss. You literally put them on your team. But I think what happens is you kind of say, hey, we're in this together. Once you build trust, they know I'm not trying to make them look stupid. They know I'm not trying to micromanage. They are stuck. And I can tell they're stuck. I didn't go in and say, this whole thing is garbage, let's move it. We're having this meeting to say, hey, it's not organizing right. And when it's not going, and I said, show me what you've got. So it wasn't, hey, I'm going to come in. Right. They were asking for help. But that doesn't mean sometimes I don't go in and say to a designer, move this up. I'm in charge ultimately, and I want to do it with the most respect, but I still you still have to do it my way in some ways. We're going to be a team 95% of the time, and 5% of the time you're going to do it my way. But that's what good leaders do, because I think that there are a lot of people who are just desperate for someone to take leadership. So they may send it in and they may know it's not good. But now if I move it around 5%, now it's my fault, not their fault. So they feel safer.
I wanted to go back to the calm real quick, because you'll hear the soft guys talk about having the calm and the chaos a little bit. But what do you say to people who are in leadership roles who otherwise have all the qualities that they need to be an effective leader, but maybe when adversity and chaos and things present themselves, they have a hard time kind of keeping it together and meeting it with some calm until they've been able to assess the situation? How do you help someone grasp that concept?
Wow, that's a good question. I think in some ways you either have it or you don't, which is probably a cop-out answer. Right? It's kind of like they used to talk about World War II or the Navy SEALs. Like, I was talking to a couple of Navy SEAL guys. We were at Coronado at the concert in the park the other day, and there were 4 or 5 of us there. And I was laughing and joking with them because I'm like bigger than all of them. Like, I'm taller than all of them. I'm bigger than all of them. And they say, we love it. We love it when Hollywood goes all out and they put these 6'5", 6'6" muscle guys, because when we go overseas, that's what everybody's looking for. And so we're just all 5'9", and we're all sneaking through, and nobody even suspects us one bit as being Navy SEALs.
Now, I was just at the Navy SEAL swim in New York, and it seemed like they were all 6'6" in Greek gods.
I haven't seen them. I was at college grad, and there are those, but it's like, I think what make them special is it's just this motley crew of people you never would have suspected would be it. But in the chaos, I think you have to slow down. So I think when it comes to chaos, in another regard, I will sometimes say to the team, look, I know we can't get there fast enough, and I know we have a ton of stuff going on, but let's just turn around and look backwards for a minute. And generally when we do that, we can all, especially me, can't believe how far we've come and how fast we've gotten there. And so even though we can't get there fast enough, if you turn around, you're like, my gosh, I can't believe how far we've come in just a year or 6 months or the last week. And so that kind of calms the situation down. Or sometimes it's like, hey, when we have a crisis, let's just all circle up. I'll give you an example. When I took over the events team, we were in debt. We couldn't make any money in the events team, and they had decided...
Dave Ramsey had a team that was in debt? Oh, this is counterintuitive.
And just say, like, the events team, the company was wildly successful. All right. There was a department, as many people have, that wasn't as wildly successful as the rest of the team, and it happened to be the events team. And in that, they were looking at it as, well, it's okay if this department doesn't make money. We'll just, because it builds radio relationships around the country. The radio stations love to have us. They get to sell sponsorships to the event. It's extra money. Or we get to move books and publishing and product around. And so it's okay if we don't do it. And I was like, hey, I think there's a better way we could do this. So I get made VP, and about 6-7 months in, I'm going down to close the books. And every month with the CFO, and you go down, and it's a pleasant experience where he goes, how come you guys are over budget again? You guys are the only department in the company that's not over budget. And to which I would always say, we have more expenses in my department in 1 month than the rest of the company has combined. Like, we were going out, we had semi trucks, we had jet fuel, we have hotel rooms, we've got labor fees in New York. Like, nobody has the expenses that we have. And not only that, multiply that times 10 different cities all at once, moving in and out of the fiscal year, and it gets really complicated. And so he bought that for a while. And then one day I didn't know, how to fix this. I'd been at it. And we were really feeling the heat because we just felt like we had to get this squared away. I didn't want to be looked at as that department who just always lost money. It's just okay if they lose money because we have all these better relationships that are being built. But so I called everybody in on the entire team. At that point, there were 14 of us who was responsible for spending money. So the 2 marketing guys, all my event producers, my sales director. If you spent any money, whether it was a penny or not, you came to this meeting, and I printed out the budget, and I opened up the budget and threw it on the table and gave everybody a copy and said, I can't figure this out. I need your help. I can't do it. It's too hard. You guys spend all this money, and I go down every month to close the budgets, and we look silly. And so we're going to figure this out. I need you guys to go home, whatever you do. I know some of you don't have any idea what a budget is, or what it looks like to do this. And even the line item was there for salaries. Not everybody's salary is listed, but you saw how much we spent in the department as a salary. And I said, one of you is coming down with me every month until we figure this out to close the books with me, so you can feel the pain and the heat the way I do. 3 months later, we were having a meeting, and someone suggested we add a band to one of our shows as the opening show at the Smart Conference we're going to do up at the Shrine Auditorium out in LA. Or maybe I suggested it, and Kristen looks at me across the table and says, if we do that, that changes our budget and we'll be over. It was the first time anybody in the team had ever spoken up about not spending money or watching their budgets. And we turned that thing around. I went from 3 million in the hole to 10 million positive. And I can tell you, in the middle of all that chaos, I could never have done it if I just wouldn't have told everybody I couldn't do it without them. And they all came aboard. So, and I think the lesson there was, for leaders, your team is desperate to help you. They may not want to do your job for the most part, or they think they do, but they don't really, but they want to help you succeed. And sometimes as leaders, we feel like we can't be vulnerable and we can't share, or it's embarrassing. And your team is the opposite. They want to help. They want to win. They want to be successful. They want to help you win. So
interesting.
So I think it's rapid fire time.
I do have one question, actually. I want to ask Ryan, if we can, and then we'll close into rapid fire. Ryan, you talked, you've had some exposure to both our organizations. You talked about commonalities. I also know you spent a good amount of time, I think you read the book twice, maybe. What is there something in there that you feel like connects us all together as a takeaway?
Well, I mean, yeah, I never served as a SEAL. I was support when I was in special warfare. But what I saw there, I've seen in a few other places in the Navy, but it's not common. And it's the thing that you write about. It's where me as just, a middle enlisted guy, I've never felt happier than when I'm with a leader that empowers me, and a leader that, we have this goal together, but you do what you need to do to make this happen. Which is also why, I'm glad that I met both of you all actually on the same day with the Trek and the Honor Foundation. So I got a double whammy of amazing culture in one trip, seeing all these different businesses. The other ones were good, but there definitely was standouts. And that was the beginning of the day was over at your firm, and then ending the day here at C3. But it showed me the importance of, now I can control this destiny. I don't have to just deal with the leader that's given to me, as it is in the military, and either you leave or they leave first, but someone's going to rotate out eventually. But the choice is mine to work for people like that. So I'd say, to me, that's the part that resonated probably the deepest, was the fact that, the empowerment of your team, and then watching them, just run.
Well, even in the language, we don't talk about working for, we talk about working with.
We don't use possessive, my, or.
I love it. Yeah, I get it. Like, we're a team. Like, there's a manager, there's a pitcher, there's a catcher. I hate the term employees. Employees show up late, they leave early, they steal while they're there. Yeah, the team members. it changes the way, like when people hear that, it changes the way they think. They don't think of themselves as employees. That's, some guy at Walmart that doesn't like their job or.
Well, I gotta say, that's a huge part of my transition is the fact that I come out of this organization that for the most part, that is the case where, you work clearly for somebody. If you said, who's your boss here? It's like, well, I kind of have bosses, I mean, it's not like I have.
We don't like that word either.
But even that, but I would say being here for, 2.5 months, that word feels weird to me because it's just not part of the culture here. And I definitely think it's helped me with my transition coming out of active service, just to be in an environment where it's like, this is everything that me as a person, wanted, but I could get little elements of it, but here I have it. And it's because of this idea of putting people first and empowering people.
I agree.
And being a team.
It's, there's in the introduction, which I think is the best actual chapter in the book. We write about a company, Watersons in England, who was a bookstore who decided to compete against the Amazons. And so he came in and started giving authority to all the people that ran the bookstores themselves and said, hey, if we don't sell the shelf space at the front to sponsorships and make money, what would you put there to sell books? And if you could write any reviews that you wanted and hire people who knew books, who would you hire? And they got rid of all these cheap things that were at the front of bookstores. They got rid of all the shelf space at the front for all the sponsorships and the publishers would pay them extra money for. And they started to turn an amazing profit and turn around the bookstores completely, so much so that Barnes & Noble paid attention and hired them away to come and try and take over their stores and run them. They put their favorite books. They put the books that the actual people in the stores wanted to read and not the ones that the publishers paid Watersons to put on the end shelves and end caps. And so basically when the corporate got out of the way and let people run the stores in a really healthy way, the way they best knew that their customers wanted and what they wanted to see, everything started to turn around.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, he referenced rapid fire. Mia explained a little. It's pretty much easy. Give us a word, phrase, thought that comes to mind. You want to kick us off? It's on the back side of your sheet. It's his first podcast.
What is something you saw recently that made you smile?
Well, I was at the Military Heroes event this weekend and just seeing so many people volunteer to take care of all these soldiers and sailors who protect us. But they also, they don't have a ton of money. And so people giving them food, people giving them clothes, people giving them back to school supplies and having all these kids run around and have all kinds of fun. That was awesome. It made me smile.
That's awesome. What's the worst job you ever had and what did you learn from it?
I mopped a mall. And I would love to tell you it was in high school, but I had just moved to Canada and I didn't quite have my green card. And so I was taking odd jobs here or there for cash, and I ended up mopping malls after everyone had left for the evening. And I remember just slopping that dirty water back and forth from one end. I mean, these malls are big. To the other. It wasn't a machine, and going, I can't believe I have a university degree and I'm doing this. One day it's going to work out for me though. But I hated that job.
You hear that, kids? You can go from mopping mall floors to #1 bestseller.
I'm sure there's something there, but I look back on it fun. Like,
is there a compliment that somebody's paid you that's been super impactful?
Yeah, I will say, we talked a lot about the events team when I took over, and, we were $3 million down. And I remember we were having drinks after a big event in some city, and I was sitting there with Dave Ramsey, and he looked at me and he said, Mefford, you took one of the very worst teams in our entire company. You made it one of the very best. That's awesome. Yeah, that felt great. Yes.
What are 3 words your friends would use to describe you?
Oh, man. Fun, loyal, and probably energetic.
Oh, man. Sounds like we got to hang out more.
Yep.
All right. This is an iPhone question. You only have space for 3 apps. What would you put on there?
That's a tough one.
Probably Instagram and Snapchat, because that's the only way my kids will communicate with me. If I text them or call them, they don't pick up and they don't answer. Yeah. I send my daughter a Snapchat, and 3 seconds later, I got a message back. I show you. My son won't say much, but he'll send me stories and funny reels and memes. And I'm like, I think he's okay. He sent something funny today, but that's it. And then probably third, oh, geez.
Can't be Amazon after you just had the bookstore reference.
Probably my mail app. I communicate with a lot of my personal mail, not my work mail. I need to throw that out there. Just I communicate with a lot of my friends that way, messages. So
Cool.
So my first concert experience was epic. It was MC Hammer, Vanilla Ice, and In Vogue. Yes. What was your very first concert?
my very first concert was in the 7th grade. I went and saw Alabama.
Oh yeah, I've seen Alabama.
And I remember them singing Elvira at the top of the lines. Yeah.
I had that record where you opened it up and they had the pink Cadillac in it. Yeah.
A hoom bop, hoom bop, mau mau.
Does anybody in here know this band?
That's Oak Boys, isn't it?
Oh, that's Oak Ridge Boys. Yeah, you're right. Elvira is Oak Ridge Boys.
I would say the first, so I was taken to that concert. Probably the first concert I ever went to was Motley Crue. Classic, and MTV had come out and they would play their albums or their requests all the time, and so they were there every day after school, and so we all got our money together and went and saw them in concert in Cincinnati.
You're in luck because Mia actually specializes in doing Motley Crue on open mic night. So
Right on.
So good. She lives around. She's known for karaoke.
just kidding, but he is a musician.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that.
All right, back to you.
Okay, what is the best Halloween costume you've ever worn?
That I've ever worn? Oh man, recently. Probably I went as a Canadian hockey player in the Olympics. And the reason that's awesome is we just did our event. It was an event we were doing for like a leadership thing, and I got to carry the torch and light the cauldron as a result of it. So it was like, for some reason, everyone else had dressed up as American, but they kind of wanted to give the Canadian, I guess, because it was the Olympics were in Vancouver, the opportunity to light the cauldron. So I wish I could tell you it was some kind of amazing, awesome thing, but it was a Canadian hockey player. I had the whole gear, the Canadian Olympic jersey and the pads and everything, and I got to run with the torch and light the cauldron. That was pretty awesome.
Sounds like an expensive costume.
I was in Canada at the time. Let me tell you, every Canadian has pads, and the jersey was the only thing that was purchased in that costume.
All right, this is the last one, and it's a little risky. What's your favorite summer activity?
Well, I play a lot of tennis, which is maybe dates me now because it should be pickleball. I've tried it. It's fun. It just doesn't give you the same kind of workout or excitement. But I like going to the beach and hiking. My dog likes to go there and walk at Mission Beach in the mornings. He likes to watch the volleyball players. And
your dog likes to watch the volleyball players.
That's my excuse, fellas.
All right.
You got to take care of the dog.
Right. And so I enjoy that. I love those things. Yeah, that's all.
Sweet. Well, podcast is called Discover the Difference. So we've got 2 questions around that. Gabe?
Yeah, so this one's the reflecting back. Back at the younger version of yourself, maybe you were, 17, 18 years old. What kind of advice would you give the younger Chris now that everything that you know now?
Probably would say hang in there. I think early on, I didn't feel like there were many people that were willing to, pour into me or help me. And it really wasn't until I got married that I bumped into people who were actually willing to do that and meet with me and mentor me and help. And I would say, be open to teaching. I don't find the best employees often are unteachable. And if I could remain teachable, I always learn so much. Even to this day, I find it useful or helpful. And so I would say, hey, stay teachable and don't give up. I didn't give up, but it might have been nicer early on and probably would have had, some happier days or months or weeks had I, stood on that probably.
That's interesting coming from the family of teachers.
Yes. Yeah. Well, right. That's fair. I think I felt like when I was younger, I felt like I was on my own a lot and I was very independent. And so I always had to figure things out. And I would probably tell me, hey, you don't have to figure things out. There are tons of people around here wanting to help you if you just ask them. And I never felt like I could or should.
Yeah, that's a good recommendation.
I would even say today, our millennials and people, they're desperate to be mentored. I took a guy out the other day, super sharp, went to MIT, works for us. It's his second job. I just took him to lunch at it's this Mexican place up there, Aero Squadron at the airport there. And I got back and got the nicest email. Hey man, I can't believe you did that. I was so glad for your wisdom. And I was like, we just had lunch, you know, but I feel like there are a lot of people that work for us today who are desperately wanting to be mentored, but they're afraid to ask anything because they'll look stupid, or we may not think highly of them if they're asking for help. Because I think we think they should have all the answers.
Yeah, that's a good point. Well, the other side of the question is around difference and what kind of makes you tick. And I kind of think through, you've created some amazing, unique opportunities for yourself. Just who just runs into Dave Ramsey and then run into Kyle, and you create this whole process. What is that about you, that if you had to pin it down to one thing that gives you this capability of creating things and finding the success you have?
Yeah, I think people might look at me and go, oh, of course you're energetic and you're fun. You know, people are going to be drawn to you, or it's easy for you to talk to people. And that wasn't always the case at all. That's something that I've taught myself. I would even say before I worked at the Ramsey organization, I was pretty quiet and shy, and I just got tasked with this job. I'd have to go to events with a video guy, and we'd have to get interviews on camera. And so I'd have to walk up to complete strangers and ask them what they thought. And I was horrible at it at first. And, quickly I realized you can't ask people before the event starts for anything because they don't really know. You have to get it at the break or at the end, and you have to be quick. And so it sort of forced me to kind of talk to people and have conversations. And I think what I learned was everybody was friendly. Everybody wanted to help. Everybody was curious. Everybody wanted to share. And so I think that my lessons and how I ended up getting that stuff was I set a goal, and then I would try and chase it. So, I'm going to get a goal. I'm going to get 10 people to talk to me at this event today. And as hard as it is, maybe I'll get 10 no's, but at least I get my goal. And then I carry that forward. It was hard. And so it was like, I want to write a book, but I don't know what it looks like, but I'm going to try and get a book deal by X. Or I want to run, a triathlon with my friend. And so I started training for swimming, and I hated it. And I wasn't a very good swimmer. So I stopped, and I ended up doing a duathlon. And I look back and go, I would never run a duathlon. I had not set a goal to run a triathlon. And so I feel like if people could just understand how important it is to write down your goals and pick a date for your goal to be achieved, how much that might change the trajectory of what they're doing and how they're doing it and where they're headed in life.
I like that. So what's next? Is it another book? Is it leadership coaching, public speaking?
I don't know what's next. I think we're open. I like working and teaching. I think it is in my blood, so to speak, with the family business. So I do like helping teaching organizations. I'm not, going to stand on a stage and bring the house down. I'm comfortable with it, but that's not me. But I would stand in front of 300 people and help them understand how they could be better leaders and talk to other leaders and help them figure that out. And so that's where I've really found my excitement, and, putting a course together around this to help others also that can't maybe come out and be a part of it, but probably something along those lines. I've done quite a bit of that in the last little while, but I still like my day job. So
yeah.
Well, where can people find you if they want to reach out?
They can reach out. So we have a website. It's called cultureforce.team. And I'm on there. Kyle's on there. A lot of our stuff is on there. Some videos are on there. You get free samples of the book if you want to check it out. We were so happy to see the people like the book. We've gotten over 5-star reviews everywhere, from Goodreads to Amazon. We hit number 1 on Amazon for leadership and for business teams, in the week we were out. And so, yeah, I would love it if it stayed there for a whole year, but maybe the next one, or maybe this will get some additional wind behind it and head up there. While I was away on vacation, we hit number 1 on audiobooks. So you just never know it's still got life.
That's amazing. Congratulations.
Thank you. It's been a year now, almost to the day.
Such a wonderful thing. Well, thanks so much for coming on. Really enjoyed getting to sit down and talk to you and learn more about you, and can't wait to get this episode out and promote it.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. That was good. Those are really good questions. I feel like I want to take another stab at that quick rapid fire, but I don't know anything about it.